The message arrived at 4:12 station time, silent as death. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just a small blinking D on Commander Theo Rourke's datapad, priority coded in cold blue. He almost didn't open it. Almost. The room was dark except for the soft thrum of Harmony Spire's artificial atmosphere. Outside the viewport, Proxima Centauri bathed the sky in a red-orange glow, like the embers of a fire long dead. Rourke sat upright in bed, unblinking, thumb hovering over the message. Then he tapped. Subject, Incident Report, Europa Station 7. Status, Deceased. Name, Rourke, Mira. Relationship to recipient, immediate family, sibling. Cause of death, structural collapse. No survivors. Disposition, civilian remains unrecoverable. The message closed on its own. Cold efficiency. Rourke stared at the screen for a moment longer, until it dimmed. Then he exhaled, slowly, as if the breath had been waiting years to escape. He stood and crossed the room, poured a shot of bourbon from the drawer behind the false panel, technically against station regulation, but diplomacy often required stronger medicine than policy. He downed it, not tasting it, then checked his reflection in the polished steel wall. Eyes bloodshot. Jaw clenched. No visible cracks, but he could feel them. Hair slightly too long for regulation. Good, kept him human. His comm pinged again, this time with the station's official tone. A calm voice followed. Commander Rourke. The Xir'Tok delegation has arrived ahead of schedule. Diplomatic talks are requested to begin within the hour. Rourke set the glass down with deliberate care. Of course they have. 42 minutes later, Rourke stepped into the central negotiation chamber. The room, a sterile cylinder of silver and pale blue, hummed with quiet energy. No windows. No distractions. Just 3 high-backed chairs, a floating display table, and more surveillance than a Terran prison block. To his right, the Delari delegation stood waiting. Tall, willowy beings with bioluminescent tendrils that shimmered like seaweed in moonlight. Gentle, curious, far too empathetic for politics. To his left, Xir'Tok. They stood like stone sentinels, 7-foot bipedal reptiles with matte gray scales and slitted eyes. At their head, Varzen Talor, the Dominion's chief envoy and a known hardliner. Commander Rourke, Varzen said in that low, vibrating voice that always felt too calm. We appreciate your punctuality. It speaks better of your species than your reputation suggests. Rourke didn't flinch. Happy to disappoint expectations. He took his seat in the central chair and linked his datapad to the floating interface. Today's objective, he began, is establishing terms for a joint demilitarized zone between your bordering systems. No weapons. No blockades. No disappearances in disputed space. And no emotionally driven retaliation, Varzen added. Rourke tilted his head. Was that aimed at someone? Merely a general reminder. Your species has a tendency. The room cooled a degree. Emotions are not weaknesses, said a Delari emissary gently. Nor are they assets, Varzen replied. They cloud reason and compromise treaties. Rourke breathed through his nose. Slow. Steady. Myra's face flickered behind his eyes, her crooked grin, her Europa Station messages full of dumb jokes and even dumber memes. He tapped the table. A holomap lit up. We'll begin with the disputed territories, specifically, the Taraxis Belt. Both sides want it. Neither side owns it. Let's solve that before we start judging species' nervous systems. For the next 20 minutes, words became weapons. Varzen spoke and clipped legalese, turning every concession into a trap. The Delari were polite, bordering on timid, always asking, never demanding. Rourke played the knife's edge, mediating with a voice that didn't betray the scream under his skin. But the cracks were widening. During a recess, Rourke stepped into the observation lounge. Alone, finally. The silence buzzed louder than any crowd. He stared at the planet-streaked void outside. She was gone. Mira, the only person who still called him T in that ridiculous sing-song way. Gone in the vacuum of Europa's minds. Just numbers now. A cause of death. A line on a report. The door hissed open. Varzen's shadow stretched across the floor. Commander. I hope I do not intrude. Rourke didn't turn. Depends. I was informed of your loss. Tragic. Yet you are still here. I find that interesting. Humans show up even when it hurts. Why? Rourke turned. Because sometimes, if we don't, everything falls apart. Varzen's head tilted. Curious logic. Your people are known for volatility. Passion. Impulse. Why assign one of your most emotionally compromised individuals to mediate such critical peace talks? Rourke stepped closer. Because no one understands the cost of peace better than someone who's just lost something they can't get back. The Xir'Tok diplomat blinked slowly. I hope your instability does not jeopardize these proceedings. And I hope your arrogance doesn't make war look like mercy. They locked eyes. Two completely different species. Two completely different kinds of fire. Then Rourke turned away. We resume in 10. Back at the table, Rourke's voice was steel wrapped in smoke. We can dance around the belt's mineral rights all day, but I suggest a rotating oversight council. Delari 1 month. Xir'Tok the next. Shared revenue under neutral observation. The Delari whispered among themselves. A promising proposal. Varzen hesitated. No traps, Rourke added. Just a system that doesn't require trust, just math. After a beat, the Xir'Tok envoy tapped his agreement into the hollow panel. Progress. Tiny. Fragile. Real. That night, Rourke sat alone again in his quarters. Another shot of bourbon untouched beside him. A message half-written to no one. He stared at the blinking cursor. Then whispered to the room. You would have laughed at all this, Mira. Said I looked like a space lawyer. Said I needed a haircut. The cursor blinked again. He closed the message, unsent. Peace was ugly. It wasn't doves and flowers. It was grief sharpened into resolve. A treaty signed with shaking hands. And if he had to carry his sister's death into that chamber every single day to make sure the galaxy understood what humans were capable of, even when shattered, then so be it. The war for peace had just begun. Rourke's knuckles split open against titanium wall plating at 306. He didn't scream. Just stood there, blood dripping from clenched fingers, breath ragged. Tension hadn't left him in 2 days. He'd been carrying it like a ticking device, silent under the skin. Commander, a voice crackled through the comm station aide Leora. Too soft-spoken for her job. The Delari and Xir'Tok are requesting your presence. They want to resume talks, early. Of course they do, he muttered. He wrapped his hand in a towel and gritted his teeth as the AI med gel dispenser hissed cold blue foam over the wound. The pain grounded him. Another day. Another performance. The negotiation chamber was colder this time. Or maybe he was. Delari emissary Vanamel offered a greeting nod, her tendrils gently pulsing with soft teal light, concern. Empathy radiated from her like heat from a fire. Commander, she said quietly. You appear unwell. Rourke didn't meet her eyes. Been a long week. Varzen Talor was already seated, flanked by 2 sub-envoys. His gaze fell immediately on Rourke's bandaged hand. A human ritual? Varzen asked. Self-harm in mourning? No, Rourke said flatly. Just needed to punch something that wouldn't break. Ah, the Xir'Tok replied, unblinking. Therapeutic violence. Another emotional tradition. Let's get to work, Rourke said, voice steady. They resumed talks over border disputes near the Arcalis corridor, an area rich in antimatter streams, valuable but volatile. Both sides wanted exclusive rights. Neither would budge. The Delari spoke in careful tones. Vanamel presented shared infrastructure proposals, joint mining, regulated draws, automated safety protocols. Rourke watched Varzen's expression carefully. The envoy listened, calculating. Then, he struck. "Commander Rourke," he said, "given your recent, personal instability, do you believe you can accurately interpret neutrality in this case?" The room held still. Rourke folded his hands. Blood had begun to seep through the bandage, faintly. "I've bled for peace in more systems than you've seen on a star map. You want neutrality? You got it. But don't mistake silence for weakness." Varzen raised a brow ridge. "Emotion colors perception. You grieve, therefore you are compromised." "I grieve," Rourke said, leaning forward, "therefore I remember what this is for." He tapped the display. A starfield map rippled open, zooming in on Arcalis. "Here's the hard truth, you both want to strip mine a death trap. Fine. But if one of you claims exclusive rights, the other sees it as escalation. Result? Cold War at best. Open war more likely." He slid a proposal forward, three-dimensional schematics showing a rotating orbital hub, monitored by neutral AI. No boots. No weapons. Just drones and data. And shared profits, split by contribution. Vanamel studied it with interest. Varzen narrowed his eyes. "You expect us to trust Delari engineering?" "No," Rourke replied. "I expect you to trust math." The conversation fractured into tangents, contingencies, trade offsets, salvage protocols. Rourke guided it like a tightrope walker over storm clouds, never letting his mind drift. But Mira was always there. In the flicker of a faulty display. In the echo of static when the translation lagged. His little sister had loved that, catching glitches in real-time comms, pointing them out like they were Easter eggs in an ancient Terran show. "Focus," he muttered under his breath. Still, his voice stayed firm when he spoke. He answered questions before they were finished. Anticipated objections. Translated between cultures that had never even shared a sunrise. Midway through the session, Leora sent a discreet message to his pad. "Sir, you're at the edge. Recommend temporary delegation." He stared at the message. The ache in his hand pulsed like a second heartbeat. He typed back. "No. Let them see." Break came 6 hours in. Rourke didn't leave the chamber. Instead, he sat, back straight, gaze distant. He didn't feel like a diplomat. He felt like a funeral procession in a business suit. Vanamel approached, her light now tinged with deep violet. "I wish to express sorrow for your loss," she said. He nodded, too tired to respond properly. "In Delari culture," she continued, "grief is not hidden. It is sung." Rourke almost smiled. "Humans scream it into pillows. Or whiskey. Or titanium walls." "I see. That is evocative." There was a long pause. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you believe your pain will affect the outcome of this treaty?" He turned to her, eyes sharp. "I'm counting on it." Session resumed. This time, Varzen pressed hard. Not with logic, but bait. Subtle insults. Thinly veiled implications. Earth's diplomatic status was granted as a courtesy, he said at one point. Not as recognition of value. Rourke didn't rise. Didn't lash out. He just stared. "You know what scares the rest of you about humans," he said finally. "It's not our weapons. It's not our tech. It's that when we hurt, we keep going. We drag the pain with us. We turn it into fuel. And sometimes, it burns the whole galaxy down." Varzen blinked slowly. "A curious method of peacekeeping. Works better than you think." By day's end, the first phase of the Arcalis proposal was accepted, conditionally. Varzen signed with reluctance. Vanamel with grace. Rourke sat alone after they left. His datapad buzzed with reports, analysis, next steps. He ignored them all. The pain in his hand was nothing compared to what he felt inside, but in that moment, it didn't matter. He'd held the line. He hadn't broken. Not today. That night, in his quarters, Leora brought him coffee, real, from Earth, smuggled through 20 layers of bureaucracy. She set it down. You know they're talking, right? About what? About the way you held it together in there. He sipped. I didn't. You didn't break. There's a difference. She hesitated, then added, and the Delari, they're not just curious about humans anymore. They're listening. Rourke looked out at the stars. One day, he said, they'll realize emotions aren't a liability. What are they, then? He didn't answer right away. Then, a language. One they're finally learning to translate. The broadcast light flicked red. They were live. Across 12 systems, over 90 species watched the final negotiations unfold in real time. Diplomacy by performance, every word weighted, every silence a statement. The table was a circle now, redesigned for symbolic equality. Useless symbolism, Rourke thought. No shape could flatten the tension in the room. Varzen Talor sat rigid, his scales dull in the cold white light. Vanamel was calm, tendrils resting still against her translucent robes. Rourke sat between them, eyes locked on the shared display like a man staring down a live bomb. He hadn't slept. Not due to nerves. He simply couldn't. His body had settled into a low, coiled hum, all systems redlined but stable. The ache in his hand had faded, replaced by a slow pulse of determination. Today, it ended. One way or another. The Delari began with proposed revisions, technical, minor. Rourke approved with a nod. Then Varzen requested the floor. We have concerns, the Xir'Tok envoy said, voice deliberate, too smooth. Specifically, the presence of Commander Rourke as mediator. Rourke's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. This human, Varzen continued, eyes cold, is emotionally compromised. His recent family loss is known. He has demonstrated erratic behavior. Physical violence. Inappropriate language. We must question the legitimacy of this proceeding. A ripple moved through the chamber. On the far wall, the translation buffer flickered with the words emotional contamination. Vanamel turned slightly toward Rourke. Waiting. Rourke stood slowly, hands flat on the table. You want to discredit me, he said. Fine. Let's talk. He glanced at the nearest camera. Let the galaxy hear. Yes, my sister died 3 days ago. A mining collapse on Europa. No warning. No survivors. She was 28. Civilian. She used to send me dumb jokes when negotiations dragged too long. His voice didn't break. It sharpened. Since then, I've signed 2 proposals. Brokered 3 compromises. Talked down 4 near walkouts. With a broken hand. With 0 sleep. With grief clawing behind my ribs like a wild thing. Silence. You call that erratic, he said, turning to Varzen. I call it human. The Xir'Tok envoy's face remained unreadable. Then you admit your emotions influence your decisions. Of course they do. Rourke's tone never wavered. So do yours. You just hide it behind language your people find acceptable. He circled the table slowly, looking at each delegate. You want humans out of this accord because we wear our pain too visibly. Because we cry, or scream, or punch steel until our hands split. But the truth is, our emotions are the reason we survived long enough to stand here at all. He stopped at the center of the room. We remember our dead. We rage against injustice. And when we build peace, it's not because we're calm, it's because we've seen war and decided not to go back. A low hum of translation filled the chamber. Somewhere, a Delari recorder blinked blue, confirmation that several external audiences had requested emotional clarification. Rourke didn't wait. You want to understand humans, he said, raising his voice. We're not logical. We're not tidy. But we feel everything, and we still choose to come to the table. That's not a weakness. That's will. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vanamel stood. In Delari symbology, she said softly, suffering is a curve, arcing toward wisdom. Commander Rourke has curved far. And we see his path clearly. She turned to Varzen. We accept the human terms. The Xir'Tok envoy's throat pulsed once, the only visible sign of emotion. This is ill-advised, he said. It is the only path forward, she replied. Varzen looked at Rourke. And if your grief drives you error? Then I'll own it, Rourke said. Humans always do. We're built for consequence. The treaty was signed 28 minutes later. Digital ink on shared accords, hashed through cross-species law. The Arcali's corridor demilitarized. Profits split. Surveillance neutral. No fleets. No tension lines. No trigger fingers waiting for an excuse. After the final signature, Rourke stood to leave. A voice stopped him. Commander. He turned. It was a Xir'Tok Jr. aide, barely taller than Rourke, younger, less stone-faced. The aide hesitated, then asked. Is it true, your kind has bad days? Rourke blinked, caught off guard. What? You said you experienced bad days. We've begun studying the concept. Rourke smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a full smile. More like a crack in a fortress wall. Yeah. We do. Bad weeks, bad months. But it's not about the day. He looked the alien in the eye. It's about what we do the day after. Back in his quarters, Rourke collapsed into his chair. The stars beyond the viewport didn't look any different. Peace never made a sound. He finally opened Myra's last message. It had sat unread since the collapse. Hey T. You better be making aliens uncomfortable again. Just remind them next time, no one's scarier than a human who feels things too hard. Also, you owe me a haircut. Love you, dumbass. Rourke read it twice. Then once more. He smiled, softly this time, and whispered, still making them squirm, sis. A Galactic Accord memo went out the next cycle. Clear. Unanimous. New diplomatic protocol for human delegates. Before engaging Terran representatives in high-level negotiations, always assess emotional condition. Check for signs of stress, trauma, or significant loss. If in doubt, reschedule. Failure to observe this protocol may result in unpredictable outcomes, unorthodox tactics, or irreversible treaties. Humanity operates on emotion. And when it's personal, they become unstoppable.